chapter 23, Acts in 23. When you get there, it was going to be standing. Acts 23. Acts 23, and we'll start reading in verse 12. And when it was day, certain of the Jews band together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. They were more than 40 that which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, We have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. When Paul's sister's son, we call him a nephew, heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said unto him and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, the prisoner, called unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who has something to say unto thee. And the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately, or how you will say that, and asked him, What is that thou hast to tell me? And he said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring Paul down tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire something of him more perfectly, but do not yield unto them, for their lying wait of them, more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart, and charged him, See that thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200, at the third hour of the night. And provide them beasts that they may set Paul and set him safe, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner, Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor Felix. Fifth reading. This man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth unto their council, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. And when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee, and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. And the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. On the morrow they lay up the horsemen to go with him, and returned to the castle, who, when they came to Caesarea, and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was, and when he understood that he was of Cilicia, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. Paul, we thank today and give blessings for have your way tonight. Open our hearts and our minds to your word. Help us that we might understand that, Father, we might be encouraged by what we read tonight. Father, you have your way. You will grow us and use us towards your purpose. For your glory, your honor, we pray in Jesus' precious holy name. Amen. I kind of remind you again of where we are. I did this a couple weeks ago, and then last Sunday we didn't preach on this, so we kind of skipped the spot again. Just kind of remember where Paul has gone on his 3 missionary journeys. He has completed them. In chapter 19, he has purpose in the Spirit that he would go to Jerusalem, and then from there he would go to Rome. And he has now come to Jerusalem. He comes to Jerusalem. James comes to him and says, Paul, we have a problem. And James is trying to do damage control. And he has devised a plan that to make Paul a symbol to the Jews that are there in Jerusalem and some who have come from Asia area. And in the process of this plan, they find him in the temple, in the midst of doing what James had told Paul to do, and the ones in Asia point a finger at him and accuse him falsely. They take hold of him and drag him out of the temple. They take him out into the streets, and they're beating him mercilessly, and would have killed him. Understand that was their goal. When the Romans, hearing the noise come out with an army, he clears the way and removes Paul, sits him in chains, because obviously he's guilty because they were beating on him, right? And when he discovers later about the time he's going to beat him to get the truth out of him that he's a Roman, he backs off. Just, no way. I'm not touching this man. And in the process of trying to find out information, they go back to the council. And Paul, knowing very shortly that he has no voice in this council, determines that part of the Sadducees and part of the Pharisees, and stirs up a mess between them over the resurrection, because the Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection, the Pharisees do. And so he creates this conflict, and the Romans remove him. It's at this point that Paul is sitting and basically waiting in prison for the next thing to happen. The Bible says here that 40 plus Jews, more than 40. I don't know how many that is, but it's more than 40. Have band together on basically a death curse, if you will. That they would never not eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. I don't know if they held that curse or not. They never killed Paul. So I don't know if these 40 plus died or not, or if they gave up on it. If maybe they went to the priest and said, listen, we can't do this. Can we get some kind of relief from this? But they were on this determination. They were going to kill Paul. And they go to the chief priest and they said, we want you to call and how the captain to bring him down so you can ask something more of him further. And in the process, he said, what we'll do is we're lying in wait. Surely we can kill Paul. I don't care what kind of escort he has. There's 40 of us. There's more than 40 of us. We can take care of this thing. So Paul's sister's son hears of this. I don't know, maybe you didn't even know that Paul had a sister, much less that she had a son. But he hears of the plot, the plan, the conspiracy, as the Bible says. And he goes to the captain of the guard, chief captain, where he actually goes to the prison and goes to see Paul and let him know what's going on. And Paul in turn turns to the centurion that's there and asks him to take his nephew to see the chief captain. And he goes to the chief captain. I said, I've read all this. I'm just telling you again what was there. I want you to get in your mind. And he goes to the chief captain. And the chief captain takes him aside, privately it says. Nobody else is hearing what's going on. The nephew tells the chief captain the plan. It seems like a pretty quick decision on the chief captain's part. I'm not keeping this Paul here anymore.
Don't know who he is really. I know he's a Roman, that's all I need to know. I'm getting out of my place. It says that he called 2 centurions. The centurions are basically captains, if you will, or commanders over 100. And he tells them to take 200 soldiers, what I would assume would be their 200 soldiers, 100 each. But then not only do you get your 200, I want you to get 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen. I don't know if you're doing the math here or not. That's 407. There's 2 centurions, 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, and a hall. There's 40 plus who want to kill him. There's 10 to 1 odds. He's not taking any chances. He is not going to let anything happen to Paul. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not letting anything happen to Paul. And he sends him on a journey, the 3rd hour of the night, to get them out of Jerusalem ahead of any opportunity to start trouble. It says here that he sent a letter to Felix, and he starts it off. He writes his name. It's the first time we've had his name. Claudius Lysias. First time we've seen his name in this whole story. And Claudius Lysias takes and writes this letter to Felix and tells him, listen, this is what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but the best I can tell is apparently some dispute over their law. But I'm sending him to you because he's from, he's a Roman. And I'm going to let them come to you and present the problem. The Bible says that at the end of that, they took off, they went to Antipatris. Now if you take and put Jerusalem down here at my elbow, and Caesarea up here at my finger. It's about like that. Drew a straight line. Antipatris would not be on that line. It would be over here, okay? But it's about a halfway point. And apparently it's a military outpost. And so the 473 set out to Caesarea. They get to Antipatris and they stop. And best I can read over that verse over and over and over again, the 70 horsemen and Paul go on to Caesarea. And the 400 soldiers and the 2 centurions head back to the castle in Jerusalem. Those 400 were to beat those 40. It still be 10 to 1 odds. By the time they leave Antipatris, I would assume at that point those in Jerusalem already know that Paul has left Jerusalem. They get to Caesarea, and Felix looks at Paul and looks at these soldiers and reads the letter. And he asks Paul, where are you from? Paul said, I'm from Cilicia. I mentioned in Central this morning that's the reason why it caught my attention. Because we were talking about when Stephen was captured and taken and then stoned. It was the Jews of Asia and Cilicia were 2 of the groups that were mentioned there. The ones that accused Paul were the ones from Asia, and the ones from Cilicia he's one of them. He was in that group. And here he is from Cilicia, and he's before Felix, and Felix says, well, then I'm going to hear you. I told you all that. Here's a reason for it. There's something that caught my attention when I was thinking about this. Let me give you a little phrase that you probably never heard of. about the 40. I'm just a little phrase, you got all hands to remember it. The 40 meant for evil, but God meant for good. You said, well, John, I've heard that. Out of the book of Genesis, Joseph, his brothers, they cast him into a pit and they sold him to slavery. And Joseph says later to them, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Listen, the 40, their intentions was evil. But God used it for good. A purpose behind this. I don't hear anybody really ever saying this, but Paul has just started his 4th missionary journey. Which is what this is. Paul is not at liberty as a missionary to walk into the halls of Felix and tell them about Christ. He's not at liberty as just a citizen of Rome to walk in before Festus and tell them about Christ. He's not at liberty just as a Roman citizen to walk before Agrippa and tell them about Christ. He's not at liberty just as a Roman citizen to walk in before Caesar and tell them about Christ. But he's going to do that on this 4th missionary journey. The only way that he can. And that's as a prisoner. I was thinking about this this morning on the radio on the way up. Al Lockman preaching his last message at the church where he pastored for years. Health reasons and age are catching up with him. Now he was talking about God's plan, and I don't fully agree with the way he looked at it, but listen. God has a plan. And God utilizes men to fulfill that plan. They meant for evil. The Bible tells us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good. He uses everything. And let me show you, just in case you forgot, I want to show you one verse again. It was the last verse we read the last time. It was in here in chapter 23 and verse 11. And the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified to me of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. Paul, you've done your job here in Jerusalem. Now you're headed to Rome. We think about all the atrocities that happen to people. The horrible things that people do. The mistreatment that Paul suffers. He will leave here. He'll be shipwrecked before he's through. I believe he says in one place that he was shipwrecked twice. You'll find him on an island off this prison ship. They're on this island, and he reaches to grab some wood, throw on the fire, and a very poisonous snake bites him. And people just stand and watch him, waiting for him to fall dead. And all he does is shake off the snake into the fire. God has a plan. And it's nothing that anyone can do but let Paul go to Rome. Those in Jerusalem can't stop him. Those in Antiochus can't stop him. Felix can't stop him. All he can do is hear the gospel. Send him home. I would say, tell you tonight that God has a plan in your life too. And if you'll put yourself under his wheels and follow his plan, there's nothing that can stop God's plan. Let's get a song.